I found it on the fridge. A list, titled, in all caps, Boundaries for a Peaceful Home Environment. 12 rules. Typed, printed, laminated. Rule number 4 was the one that punched me straight in the chest. No more pressure or expectations for physical affection of any kind. Number 7 was close behind. We are no longer required to share a bedroom. Sleeping separately promotes rest and emotional clarity. I stood there with my morning toast half-chewed, staring at it like I'd discovered a new species. I didn't even know she owned a laminator. And that's the weird part. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even emotional. It was like she was rolling out a company handbook for a new intern. I walked into the living room, where she sat on the floor doing yoga stretches in silence. Calm, serene, unbothered. Darla? I held the laminated page like it was radioactive. What is this? She didn't look up. She just adjusted into some pose with her legs twisted under her like a human pretzel and said, "It's for us. I think it'll help reset the dynamic." Reset the dynamic. I'd heard that phrase before, usually on podcasts hosted by influencers who think eye contact is a trauma response. "You could have at least talked to me before announcing this," I said. Darla finally looked up. "Everett, we've talked. You just never listen." I couldn't even argue. I mean, we'd had conversations, but none that included redefining the entire relationship by way of passive-aggressive bullet points. Then she stood up, patted me on the shoulder, like a nurse with a confused patient, and said, "This isn't about you. It's about me needing space. It doesn't mean I love you less. Just differently." I wish I had something noble to say here. I don't. I stood there like an idiot, nodding. But what hit me most wasn't even rule number 4. It was the fridge itself. Covered in her reminders, spa appointments, herbal deliveries, therapy sessions, massage punch cards, and even a magnetic list of my monthly bill payments she had arranged for her subscriptions. And suddenly I saw it. She wanted all the privileges of a partnership, minus the partnership. So I made a list too. Not laminated, not even typed, just handwritten, on the back of one of her yoga retreat flyers. Everett's new rules. No more Venmo emergencies. No more spa packages on my dime. No more private Pilates sessions charged to my account. No more pretending I'm a roommate who sponsors your lifestyle. No more paying for your life while getting erased from it. That night, I didn't say a word. I quietly logged into our shared banking app, unlinked every subscription, froze the credit card she used for her wellness memberships, and canceled the autopay for her car insurance. By morning, she noticed. "Did you cancel my Face Sculpt Plus?" she asked, holding her phone like it had betrayed her. I sipped my coffee and replied, "We're just resetting the dynamic. It's not about you. Just financial clarity." I thought that would be the end of it. But later that afternoon, I got a call. Not from her. From someone who should have had no idea we were having problems. And what they said, it proved that Darla had rewritten more than just the rules in our house. The number wasn't saved in my phone, but the area code was local. I let it ring twice before answering, still expecting it to be one of those robotic, "your car warranty has expired" scams. Instead, a very real, very polished female voice came through. "Hi, is this Mr. Everett Lorne?" Speaking. "This is Natalie from Praxis Wellness. I'm the billing coordinator here." My stomach dropped a little. Praxis Wellness. That was Darla's fancy health center. The one with the sauna pods and facial cryotherapy and life coach alignment sessions. The same center I'd just cut off from our joint card an hour ago. "We're following up because we received a payment decline notification tied to your wife's account. She listed you as the primary sponsor, and her elite plan renews today. I'm calling to confirm whether you'd like to update the card or—" I cut her off. "I'm not updating anything. Please remove my name from everything. Permanently." There was a pause. "Mr. Lorne, just to clarify, are you no longer consenting to financially support Mrs. Lorne's treatment plan, including the private sessions?" "Correct." Another pause. Then she said something that didn't sit right. "Understood. I'll inform Dr. Clements and Coach Reed. They've both worked closely with her this month, and I'm sure they'll want to follow up." "Dr. Clements and Coach Reed? Wait, who's Coach Reed?" "Oh, I assumed you knew. He leads our emotionally grounded intimacy workshop. He and Darla were paired for guided somatic sessions. It's a fairly advanced part of the couple-free therapy path. Very hands-on." My jaw clenched. I had no idea what somatic sessions were, But the phrase very hands-on had no business being thrown around this casually in relation to my wife and some coach. I ended the call without saying goodbye. And then I sat there, in my silent kitchen, with that laminated list still hanging on the fridge and the ugly realization seeping in. This wasn't just about boundaries. This wasn't about healing or space or clarity. This was about replacement. Someone named Coach Reed, had clearly entered a space that used to belong to me. Not just physically, but emotionally, intimately. And Darla hadn't just let him in. She had built a pathway, handed him a map, and locked me out. I walked to the bedroom. She wasn't home. Surprise. I opened the drawer she never let me touch, the one she called her alignment corner. Inside, under essential oils and affirmation cards, were neatly stacked appointment summaries from Praxis Wellness. Dozens of them, each one listing her session times. The frequency was insane. 4 visits a week, multiple sessions, names repeated over and over: Dr. Clements, Coach Reed, sound bath therapy, trust exercises, mirror exposure with partnered breath work. Breath work? I flipped to a yellow note at the back of the drawer, written in her unmistakable handwriting. Thursday, full open body workshop with Reed. Bring extra set of clothes. Prepare for release. My hand was shaking. I wasn't a confrontational person. I'd always played the understanding partner, the good listener, the one who supported growth. But this wasn't growth. This was a covert divorce, slow and quiet, dressed in yoga pants and lavender tea. When she got home later that evening, I didn't say anything. I just watched. She hummed a little song as she unpacked organic snacks, kissed the cat on the head, scrolled through her phone, smiled at something. And when I asked casually, "How was Praxis today?" she looked me right in the eyes and said, "Refreshing. I'm learning to detach from codependency. You should try it." That was the first time I realized she wasn't just detaching. She was training to forget me, professionally, deliberately, and possibly with someone else's help. I wish I could say I confronted her that night, that I slammed my hand down and demanded answers about this Coach Reed situation. But no, I sat in silence, pretending to be too tired to talk. She didn't even notice. Darla just placed a bowl of cut fruit in front of me, kissed the top of my head like she was tucking in a sick uncle, and said, "Remember, try to stay neutral." Neutral. She'd weaponized therapy speak into a way to silence me. But I wasn't going to stay neutral anymore. The next day, I worked from a coffee shop across town, somewhere quiet enough for me to think, loud enough that no one would hear me spiral. I opened my laptop and typed in Praxis Wellness plus Coach Reed. Nothing came up at first, just pages of soft branding, inspirational testimonials, and buzzwords like trauma-informed, nervous system reset, and emotional sovereignty. A few clicks later, I found the staff page. Coach Reed. Full name, Ellison Reed. In the photo, he was smiling in that smug, overly symmetrical way that screamed, "I know how to hold space and break hearts." Long hair tied into a perfect bun, tight Henley shirt. He looked like he'd been grown in a lab for vulnerable women in identity crisis. His bio said he specialized in somatic rescripting, boundary repair, and co-regulation through breath-based intimacy facilitation. I had to read it 3 times. I wasn't even sure what most of it meant, but it definitely didn't sound like something I'd be okay with my wife attending 3 times a week. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell myself it was just woo-woo nonsense, spiritual fluff, until I clicked on the testimonials tab. The first review wasn't from Darla, but it easily could have been. Coach Reed helped me reconnect to the parts of myself I had buried under years of marriage. I now understand the difference between obligation and authentic connection. For the first time in my adult life, I feel free. It had 5 stars and 312 upvotes. I felt sick. I spent the rest of the afternoon combing through every public-facing comment, review, and article connected to Praxis and this walking cologne commercial of a man. That's when I stumbled across the client workshop gallery, photos from events they hosted at retreats. They were labeled by year, location, and theme. I scrolled fast until a face caught my eye. Half profile, low lighting, but undeniably her. Darla, barefoot in a candlelit circle, eyes closed, sitting across from Coach Reed, their hands pressed together, knees almost touching. The caption read, "Rescripting Ceremony, Intimacy Reclamation Series, Summer Session." The photo was from last year, while we were still sharing a bed. And here's the thing that broke me. That same weekend, she had told me she was visiting her sister for a mental reset. I even dropped her off at the train station. She packed a duffel bag, kissed my cheek, and told me not to wait up. She lied. And now I was seeing the evidence dressed up as enlightenment. I took screenshots of everything. Every testimonial, every photo, every date that overlapped with her wellness trips. My laptop became a crime board. I was connecting lines that she never thought I'd be smart enough to trace. But here's where it took a turn I didn't expect. I logged into our cloud storage, the shared one we hadn't used since our joint vacation to Sedona 3 years ago. I was looking for old documents, invoices, anything I might have missed. Instead, I found a folder I'd never seen before, titled in all lowercase letters, Breathwork Logs. Inside were PDFs, all named by date. Some titled Breakthroughs, others Private Reflections. My hands shook as I opened the first one. It was her journal. She had been uploading personal entries, some typed, some scanned from handwriting, into our shared cloud, thinking I'd never check it. The first entry was from 8 months ago. Today, during guided session, I felt Everett fade from my body. I imagined dissolving the contract we'd signed, not legally, but spiritually. Reed said, I am more than someone's partner. I am a sovereign force reclaiming my space. Another one. Intimacy isn't sacred if it feels like performance. I've performed for Everett for years. Reed says I have to let the roles die to feel reborn. She wasn't pulling away from me. She was erasing me. Like I was a failed version of herself she had outgrown. But she had left the door unlocked. She had assumed I'd never be curious enough to look. Well, I had looked, and I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was planning. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Not after reading what she'd written. It was like someone had sliced open my past year and dumped acid into it. All the silent dinners, the turned backs, the strange excuses. I thought I had imagined most of it. But no. She had been documenting it like a science experiment, logging my slow erasure in neat little PDF files titled Sovereignty. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, my mind moving through thoughts I never imagined I'd entertain. I realized something important around 5:11 a.m., just as the light started crawling across the floorboards. Darla had gotten sloppy. Not emotionally. No, she was as cold and measured as ever in real life. But in her digital trail, she was careless. She used our shared storage. She didn't encrypt her files. She never once thought I'd look. That was her first real mistake. The second came 2 days later. It was a Thursday. I had started working out of the house again, not because I needed to, but because I couldn't breathe in that place anymore. The scent of her diffuser gave me headaches. Her chanting affirmations looped on Bluetooth. Her sticky notes that used to be cute now felt like surveillance. That day, I left my laptop open on the kitchen table by accident. Completely by accident. Or at least, that's what I told myself later. I had forgotten to shut it before heading to the corner store. Just 10 minutes out. When I got back, the lid was down. Which was odd. Darla wasn't in the room. But she emerged from the bedroom a minute later, holding a matcha cup she hadn't had when I left. That was mistake number 2. She had seen something. I played it cool for the rest of the day, but I could feel it. Her energy had shifted. She was suddenly watching me. She lingered in doorways longer. She kept asking questions she never asked before. What time are you working tomorrow? Are you still using that external drive for your files? What's your iCloud password again? I forgot where we store tax stuff. It was subtle, but to a man who had spent months living under emotional coldness, any shift, even 1 degree warmer, felt blinding. And fake. She was scared. Or worse, she was trying to get ahead of something. That night, she made us both tea. She hadn't made me anything in weeks. She handed me a cup and said, I've been thinking. We've both been tense. Maybe we should try couples meditation together. There's a couples breathwork weekend coming up. I could get us in. I didn't drink the tea. Instead, I smiled and said, sure. I'll check my schedule. She relaxed. Just a bit. That meant she wasn't sure how much I had seen. She was still guessing. Still working from a script. But now, for the first time, I was the one holding the invisible pen. I stayed up that night and printed every single entry from the cloud. I moved them to an encrypted flash drive. I dug into the email she used for retreat signups and began cross-referencing dates, hotels, and even social media photos where she'd been tagged by others. In one album, posted by a Holistic Intimacy Retreat account, I found a video, 32 seconds long. Darla is seated on a yoga mat in a circle. She's blindfolded. Hands out. Coach Reed is behind her, guiding her through a breathing pattern. But then, at second 24, he places his hand on her waist. And she doesn't flinch. She leans into it. The caption? Breaking resistance. Building embodied trust. It had 1,600 likes. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even feel angry, not in the way you'd expect. What I felt was clarity. The kind of painful, burning clarity that dries out every last drop of hope inside you. She had already crossed the line. Maybe not in a legal sense. Not yet. But emotionally? Physically? Intentionally? Absolutely. So I made a decision. I called my bank and scheduled a meeting to begin separating our finances. I reached out to a family friend, a lawyer, to ask what it would take to discreetly review our lease and remove her name from all utilities. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper into my own ribs, I opened the old wooden box in the hallway. The one with all the anniversary cards, her old notes, and the letter she once wrote on our second wedding anniversary about how I was the only safe place she had ever known. I read it. I folded it. And then I put it through the shredder. Slowly. That night, I left my laptop open again. Only this time, it wasn't an accident. I left a single file on the screen, titled Somatic Lies, a Timeline. I made sure the screen wouldn't lock. And then I went to bed. I woke up the next morning to silence. No blender buzzing. No incense burning. No passive-aggressive podcast playing in the background. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Darla pacing barefoot across the tile floor. She didn't say a word as I walked into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, arms crossed, eyes locked on my open laptop. The same file was still on the screen, untouched. Somatic Lies, a Timeline. I poured myself coffee. No shaking hands. No nervous glances. I just waited. And finally, she broke the silence. "So, you've been spying on me?" she asked, voice thin but tight, like she was trying to hold together a dam with dental floss. "No," I replied calmly. "I opened a shared drive. That you used. Voluntarily." Her mouth twitched. "Those were private reflections. Sacred processing. And I respected all of it," I said, stirring my coffee. "Until I found out that processing meant rewriting our marriage behind my back with a man named Reed who touches you in the dark and talks about embodiment like it's a video game level." She stood up sharply. "You're twisting everything." I set the mug down. "You twisted everything, Darla. You laminated a list of boundaries while you were emotionally, and let's be real, physically detaching from me through whatever that retreat cult is calling spiritual intimacy these days." For a second, she looked like she might break. Like the mask was cracking. But then, she did something that I didn't expect. She clapped. Slowly. Twice. "Well," she said. "There it is. The monologue." She pointed a finger at me like she was cueing a stage light. "This is the performance I knew was coming. The angry victim. The betrayed martyr. Bravo." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" She stepped closer, eyes wild and weirdly gleaming. "You think I didn't want to love you? Everett, I tried. I waited for you to evolve with me. But all you ever did was cling. You clung to routine. To comfort. To me. Like I was your security blanket. Reed doesn't ask me to shrink myself to make him feel man enough. He witnesses me. Witnesses you." I repeated, stunned. "You're not at a crime scene. You're at a group cuddle funded by my direct deposit." That finally got to her. She grabbed the mug and threw it. Not at me, but at the wall behind me. Coffee sprayed across the kitchen cabinets. The crash echoed like a fire alarm in the quiet morning. And then she cried. But not soft, guilty tears. Big, shaking, theatrical sobs. She dropped to the floor like her knees gave out and whispered, "I just wanted to feel seen." I stood there frozen. There was a time I would have rushed to her, held her, apologized for things I didn't even do. But this time, I didn't move. "You were seen," I said. "You just got bored of being loved in silence." Her sobs slowed. She wiped her face, then looked up at me, cheeks flushed and trembling. "So what now? You kick me out? You go full Reddit revenge husband?" It was almost funny that she used the exact words I'd been too afraid to say out loud, the Reddit husband. Like she knew the pattern already. Like she'd already cast me in the role of bitter ex, typing into the void while she flourished. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not kicking you out." A flash of confusion. "Then what are you doing?" "I'm letting you stay," I said, walking past her toward the hallway. Because it's going to be a lot more satisfying when you realize you were the one who walked out. And you'll have to live with the knowledge that I didn't stop you. She stared at me, eyes narrowed, lips pressed so tight they almost vanished. I see, she finally said. So you're going to do this the stoic man way? Stay cold, get even? No, I said, pausing in the doorway. I'm going to do it my way. The quiet way. She didn't follow me. I heard her stand, then the sound of her cleaning the broken mug. But something in her energy had shifted. The confidence, that clinical detachment she had worn for months, had cracked. Because now, she knew I had stopped reacting. Now, she knew I was watching. And Darla? She'd spent months preparing to fight a man in pain. She wasn't ready for a man with a plan. I didn't go to work the next day. I told my clients I needed a week to focus on personal restructuring. That wasn't a lie. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was auditing, reviewing, investigating. Not just her lies, but the machinery I'd unknowingly built around them. I started with the accounts. Bank statements, app transactions, overlapping memberships, you name it. Darla hadn't just emotionally checked out. She had financially entrenched herself in my life like a parasite with a PhD in self-care. Monthly infrared therapy, $260. Conscious uncoupling, webinars, $79 each. A surprise fee from something called the Emotional Liberation Retreat, hosted in Taos, New Mexico. I thought she'd gone to visit her cousin that weekend. She had sent me photos of their Airbnb. Turns out that same Airbnb was listed on the retreat site. Same rug, same window, same dream catcher. But the real punch to the stomach came when I checked a forgotten joint email we once used for airline points. She hadn't logged out of it. Buried in the inbox was a thread from 4 months ago, a rental car confirmation, a hotel itinerary, and 2 plane tickets. One was in her name. The other was for Ellison Reed. They flew to Oregon for a Coherence and Clarity Couples Detox experience. Couples. It was spelled out in bold, 2-person dome tent, private forest immersion. I remember that weekend vividly, because she had come home drained, telling me her sister's kids gave her a migraine. I had made her soup. She didn't touch it. I stared at the screen for almost 20 minutes, trying to decide whether I felt more rage or relief. Rage, because it confirmed the betrayal. Relief, because I no longer needed to doubt my own gut. It was like finally hearing the confession you already knew by heart. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I made an appointment with my accountant. I asked what I'd need to do to protect my business assets from a possible separation. He said we'd be okay if we acted fast and quiet. He also asked if I wanted to freeze all cards under my name, including Darla's. Yes, I said, and switch our shared checking account to view-only access for her. He nodded, then paused and said, "She's not going to take this well, you know." I smiled. She wanted evolution. I'm just evolving faster. Next, I called the landlord. Our lease was due for renewal in 6 weeks. I told him I wouldn't be renewing, but that I'd pay for 2 months beyond the end date if I could remove my name early and leave her with the full responsibility. He agreed, especially after I offered to send the paperwork that same day. It was clean, quiet, legal, and irreversible. But the final piece came later that evening, when I returned home and found her pacing the kitchen again. "I think something's wrong with my card," she said, not making eye contact. I tried to order groceries, and it declined. I set my keys down. That's strange. And my gym app won't let me book a session. Weird, I said, opening the fridge. Maybe it's a glitch. You know how banks are. Her mouth pressed into a line. "Everett, did you change something?" I took a long sip from a bottle of water before responding. "Yeah, I started an audit. Not of you, of myself. And I realized I was spending an obscene amount of money on a relationship that didn't exist anymore." She said nothing, just stood there, barefoot, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to hand her a script she could perform her way out of. But I had nothing rehearsed. "I'm not going to fight," I added. "You wanted space. You have it. Financially, emotionally, physically. You're completely unburdened by my presence now." She finally looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. "This is punishment," she whispered. "No, this is a correction. You think you're the good guy now? Freezing me out like I'm the problem?" "I don't think I'm the good guy," I said. "I just don't want to be the idiot anymore." She walked toward me then, not in anger, but almost in pity. She placed a hand on my arm like I was a wounded animal. "Everett, This is just a phase. You're reacting. You always overthink everything. I pulled away. I've been quiet for so long you confused my silence for submission. That's not overthinking, Darla. That's observation. She didn't follow me. She didn't yell. She just stood there with a faint smirk on her face. But behind it, I saw it. Panic, creeping in like black ink in water. Because for the first time since she started pulling away, I wasn't begging. I wasn't chasing. I was calculating. And she didn't know what I'd do next. Which was exactly how I wanted it. The next 3 days were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from calculation. Darla stopped asking questions. She stopped confronting me. She'd retreat into her yoga corner and stare at her phone for hours, probably messaging her little enlightenment group for advice on how to transmute financial betrayal into spiritual growth. But I wasn't done. Not even close. You see, people like Darla, people who build new identities out of mantras and mirror work, they're not afraid of consequences. They're afraid of accountability, especially public accountability. And it just so happened I had the tools for that. I didn't post on Reddit. Not yet. I didn't go to her friends or family. I didn't even speak to her wellness circle. Instead, I did something simple. I opened our shared photo archive. We had hundreds of pictures from over the years, trips, birthdays, random Tuesday dinners, moments she used to say were proof that we worked. I selected 32 of them. One for each week I now knew she had been attending workshops behind my back. And for each photo, I added a caption, a date, a small note. Nothing cruel, nothing dramatic, just facts. This was the weekend she told me she was at her sister's. I dropped her at the train. She flew to Oregon with a coach instead. She said we were reconnecting this night. Hours before this photo, she had completed a spiritual divorce ritual at a retreat. She was smiling here. I had just paid off her retreat tuition. She never told me what it was really for. Then I uploaded them into a private online gallery and sent the link to exactly one person, her mother. Now, before you assume this was some immature revenge stunt, hear me out. Her mother and I had always been close. Too close, maybe. She was the only one who ever pulled Darla aside after that family Christmas where Darla joked in front of everyone that I was more committed to our Amazon cart than to her emotional needs. Her mother once told me, after a bottle and a half of wine, she doesn't know what it's like to build. She only knows how to explore and escape. So I sent her the gallery. No preface, no context, just a message. You always asked what happened. I think it's time you saw. An hour later, she replied. Only one sentence. You are not the crazy one. I am so sorry. I closed my laptop and sat in the stillness, letting it wash over me. Not guilt, clarity. That's what this had become. Not revenge. Not spite. Exposure. She'd been performing vulnerability and healing while actively rewriting our reality behind my back. But her mask was starting to slip, and she felt it. That night, she came home late. No explanation. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying in the car. She walked past me and went straight into the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets with a little more force than necessary. Do you want to talk? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned around, arms crossed, and said, You've humiliated me. Where? I asked, keeping my tone even. She paused. You know where. Ah, I said, nodding slowly. So it's not what you did. It's that someone saw it. Why my mother? She snapped. Because your mother is the only person who ever told me the truth about you, even when you wouldn't. Her mouth dropped open for a second, but she quickly recovered. That was cruel, Everett. You've gone from passive-aggressive to just mean. Mean would have been canceling your car insurance while you were out of town, or forwarding your breathwork logs to Praxis's board of directors. This was nothing. You should be grateful I still care enough to keep it quiet. That's when she sat down at the table and said something I didn't expect. I think I want to leave. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was soft, almost gentle. And I knew immediately. She didn't mean leave the room, or even leave the house. She meant leave me. And for the first time in this entire mess, I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel desperate. I just said, okay. She blinked. That's it. Yes. I figured you'd fight harder. I've been fighting for a long time, I said, standing up. You just weren't watching. She stared at the floor. And for a moment, she looked like the old version of herself, the one who used to scribble hearts on napkins and say I was her grounding cord. But then she said something that finally shattered what little was left. I think I'm happier when I'm not someone's wife. And with that, she stood up and walked to the bedroom. Not packing, not crying, just existing in that cold, self-righteous air she'd perfected. I didn't follow. Instead, I walked into the guest room, opened my drawer, and pulled out the one thing she never knew I had. The folder with her legal signature authorizing me as sole primary on our lease renewal, signed 3 months ago, when she still thought I was sleepwalking through our finances. She wanted to leave? Perfect. I already had everything in place. The suitcase appeared by the front door just after noon. It was navy blue with a frayed handle, the one she always said she hated but never replaced. I didn't ask if she needed help carrying it. She didn't ask if I cared that she was leaving. There were no big speeches, no yelling, no final desperate tears, just quiet, an exhausted kind of quiet. She stood by the doorway, clutching her phone in both hands like it was a lifeline. "I'm not going far," she finally said, without turning around. "I know," I replied, "but I am." She slowly turned to face me. "What does that mean?" "It means I've already signed a lease across the city. It's just me on it. Effective next week. Utilities transferred. Furniture arranged. And you?" I nodded at the suitcase. "You'll stay here. The last month is paid." Her eyes widened. "You're giving me the apartment?" I shrugged. "You made it clear you wanted space. Now you've got a whole lease of it." She looked stunned, almost like she'd been expecting a fight, maybe even hoping for one. But I had none left to give. And to be honest, it felt good. "I'll forward the change of address forms," I added. "You don't have to worry about paperwork." There was a long pause. And then she said something that actually sounded real for once. "You're not who I thought you'd be at the end of all this." "I'm not who I thought I was either," I said. She gave a weak nod, then stepped out into the sunlight without another word. No hug, no glance back. Just the quiet click of the door closing behind her. For a while, I just stood there, letting the stillness settle around me like dust. It wasn't sadness I felt. It wasn't anger either. It was something rarer. Peace. You see, for months, I thought closure meant answers. Revenge. Justice. A dramatic confrontation or a viral moment of truth. But closure, it turns out, is more boring than that. It's paperwork and silence. It's not needing the last word. It's watching her leave and not feeling hollow. It's realizing the person you were begging to stay was never really in the room with you in the first place. 3 weeks later, I moved into a modest studio across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No essential oils. No affirmations taped to mirrors. No laminated rules on the fridge. Just a man. A couch. A few plants I was learning to keep alive. And sunlight through clean windows. I signed up for a cooking class. Not to impress anyone, just because I wanted to. I bought a bike. Not to get anywhere, just to move again. And one day, I saw her name pop up on my phone. I didn't answer. Because the final boundary wasn't financial. It wasn't legal. It wasn't even emotional. It was this. I no longer needed her to know I was okay. Because for the first time in over a year, I really was.